Okie dokie. Well, I think we are live here now. Will, while we have folks trickle in, I would love to. I would love to hear how your Halloween was because you have a 5-year-old, right?
I do. And she drives most of our activities these days. Halloween this year was a blast. I live in Hoboken, New Jersey, and the whole
hmm
city showed up. We had a parade in the morning with thousands of other Hoboken residents dressed up to the T's. And um,
Nice,
my daughter was Ariel from The Little Mermaid. I was Eric,
amazing,
her prince, and my wife was a princess. And that's just
amazing.
representation of who she is normally.
That's fantastic. I wish I could say that I had my family costume game tight. Unfortunately, I didn't. My son, my 4-year-old was Spider-Man, but the dad effort I did put in was I made this super ornate Spider-Man pumpkin for him, and it was a forcing function for me to figure out how to do the translucent carving effect. I don't even know what the technical
Ooh,
term is for it. I know it was super involved. Where you do the cut through the pumpkin, but then there's the scoring or the
yeah,
gouging. Yeah, and use a
yeah.
wood gouger, which is scary AF because anyway, it was a whole thing. It took me 2 hours, but the results ended up being pretty solid. Wonderful. Well, let's get into the geek sesh here. Will, I'm super pumped to have you here as another epic sales nerd like myself. I'm really excited to to chop it up with you and kind of answer questions live that we get coming in here. Just for folks who are joining us for the first time, welcome to Modern Sales Power Hour. This is a live Q&A session. There have been questions that have been submitted ahead of time, but literally what this exists for is to answer your thorniest sales excellence, sales operations, sales management, et cetera, questions, largely because this is something that I've done, over the last half decade or so, kind of individually with people who have challenges, sales leaders or whatever. And at one point someone was like, yeah, you know what, we should just do this publicly where people can, because the questions that are being asked, lots of other people have those questions too, and so we can just do that. And then even better, what you can do is you can bring on another sharp resource as well. What's better than one sales nerd, two sales nerds, and so conveniently, I know a lot of really amazing sales operations, sales leaders, and what have you. And so that's where Power Hour came from. And so what we'll do across the next 50 minutes or so is we'll just get into questions, very tactical questions that people have submitted ahead of time. If people have questions live, they can ask them. We'll bring them up on stage, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's kind of how Power Hour works. This is like many things, this is a modern sales production. So production of modern sales pros, the nation's largest sales operations and leadership community, peer education community, which literally exists to help people up their career game and kind of answer questions themselves, right? Through virtual experiences, an online forum, in-person experiences soon, you know, knock on wood, chop chop. But we'll be getting that going in Q1. So the whole idea here is live Q&A. If you have questions, it can't be too tactical. It's not you will not be able to stump Will Foley on should I do this with a workflow rule or a flow or a whatever. You will not be able to stump him. You will not be able to stump me. This is all about audience participation. This is not us sitting here blathering about high level generalities. It's all about tacticality, because what's the joke when critics get together, they talk about theory. When artists get together, they talk about the price of turpentine. We're here to talk about the price of turpentine, right? Because that's where good stuff happens. So with all that said, I thought what would be fantastic is for us to introduce our illustrious guest, Will, here. Will, you want to give a little background on what you do at Brazen, what you did at Splash, kind of how you came to sales excellence, et cetera?
Yeah, happy to. And Pete, so excited to jam with you today.
Always.
Every time we connect, it's just nuggets of gold I walk away with. So I got my bag. I'm ready to fill it. So
Yeah.
thanks. I think like most revenue operations leaders out there, you fall into the role. How I fell into it is really from my operations background. I'm an engineer by trade, but never worked a day in engineering. When I joined Splash almost 8 years ago, I was a customer success manager because they didn't have budget for a dedicated ops person. So I
didn't know that.
Right to the front lines. And it was the best experience for my career development to take that approach.
Amazing.
Absolutely. And through the evolution of scaling at Splash, I drew the short straw. So as we kind of started role specialization at Splash, we created a professional services team, a support team, a design team, and then customer success team. And that short straw was me. So I had to continue to carry the bag of quota renewals and keeping customers happy until we got large enough to have a dedicated ops role. And that was the start of my last 5 years in revenue operations.
That's awesome. Yeah. And we're huge, obviously we're huge Splash fans over here at MSP. We use it for all the events that we run. So when you registered and you saw that really dope landing page, you're like, wow, this looks so nice. What's going on here? Wow. Oh man, I'm registered. That took like 2 clicks. That was Splash software. And then it fired over into our HubSpot instance and like because we're operationally excellent too. So like we're huge Splash fans over here. And so Will, now you run revenue operations over at Brazen, which is recruiting technology, if I recall correctly. Is that right?
That's correct. And Brazen was one of the lucky tech companies out there that saw tremendous growth through the pandemic. They're virtual recruiting event software that really help scale a really overworked end user. Talent acquisition and recruiters out there are literally swamped. People are changing jobs like crazy. Roles are opening up for growth. And so our software at Brazen really helps scale that. And so I was brought in to help scale their go-to-market function.
I love it.
And it's been a blast. I've loved it since day one, and I'm on day estimating 172. And
that's a Will Foley estimate.
Plus or minus 5% accuracy on
that. I was gonna say with a single significant digit there. I'm glad there. I mean, at least there wasn't a decimal in there. I'm glad. That's awesome, man. Okay, cool. So let's get into this. And actually, so for folks that don't know, I'm Pete Kazanjy. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. We make data-driven sales management software that helps managers, AE managers, SDR managers, AM, CSM managers use data to manage, improve rep and team performance there. I also was the founder of Modern Sales Pros. And like, I just kind of like sales nerd topics, revenue excellence topics, which is this is kind of like the highlight of my week, is I get to hang out and geek out on these topics, keeps me sharp. And then we can kind of share things with the community as well. So we had a bunch of kind of pre-questions that I'm going to get into, but I love the fact that we just got a question from the audience here from Carl. So what he has a question around, is cold calling dead? And so I think I would love to get your perspective on this here, Will, in a hot second, but I'll kind of take a first shot at this. And I think the answer to that is that I don't think cold calling is dead. I think it's just like getting smarter, and like, as with all things, we're all about like continuous improvement, where it's all about continuous improvement, right? And so what we do is we use like the tools that are available to us. Like back in the day, we couldn't get access to people's email addresses necessarily, so we would, we would have to call down to folks, and so like that was kind of the way that we would brute force things. But then now we can have like email access through things like Zoom Info or like Clearbit or what have you. So now people like, and then the thing that's really cool about that is you can automate the heck out of that, right? You can do automated touches and what have you. And I think, well, like that's great because it's scalable, but it also kind of like misses out the opportunity of like when you're having a live synchronous interaction with somebody, when you get somebody on the line, that can be, you can have these like micro objection handle situations here, where rather than having like a long semi-asynchronous communication where it goes back and forth like ping pong, every 4 hours or whatever, you can have like a very quick, back and forth there. The problem, of course, is that like with cold calling, going down a big list, and like most of the time it's like empty, 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 connect, right? Like that's really labor intensive. So I think what kind of happened is that like cold calling fell off because it was like a lot of effort with like low results as compared to automated email. Now the cool thing is that one, those databases now have more access to things like cell phone numbers. You can start doing kind of like lightweight asynchronous, kind of like cold text messaging and things like that. But then combined also with things like intent information to make it such that you're not actually doing like cold calling, but you're doing like, it's not like warm calling, it's more like lukewarm calling. I don't know, like what you would actually call it. Plus, there's also really interesting kind of like automation software like Orem is a really interesting company that does, what is it called? Like AI predictive dialing or predictive dialing platforms. I forget what like the category name is, but point is that like I think it fell off for a while for good reasons, but then it's kind of coming back because it turns out that like having a live conversation with somebody, if you can get them, is like a really great way of having like a rich conversation. Will, what's your take on this? Do you guys have much calling in your BDR? I don't even remember if you guys have a BDR team or what the deal is. Maybe you can kind of give a little bit of perspective there.
Yeah, we're growing our BDR team at Brazen, because of what you've noted with just the human interaction is so powerful. And I think, to your point, from my perspective, cold calling is not dead. It's changing. Mm-hmm. It's like fashion. You get bell bottoms in, you get bell bottoms out, you get high rise, you get low rise jeans, you get all of these things come in cycles. And so I think the technology is enabling a refocus on what it actually means to cold call, but it is it's not dead. But when I do think about prospecting and opening doors, to your point, you do have to be a little more sophisticated, and be more thoughtful in the approach, because I think when you do make that connection, you really need to make a great first impression, and it's got to go really, really well. So that means our BDR teams are really going to be rock solid with their pain point conversation right from the start, because we know we only get 15, 30 seconds of doing it right.
Yeah, and that puts a lot of like operations pressure on stuff, because it's like, the person's got to have the BDR's got to have context right there. Like, hey, the reason why this person's in my queue right now is because, this piece of information, like, oh, they're an intent thing, or alternatively, hey, you know what, they downloaded this white paper, they downloaded this calculator however long ago. And so like having that context right there so they can be able to, and then like having that context, having the persona context. Thinking about Brazen right now, like, oh, this is a director of HR. They're going to have different interests than a university recruiting manager, right? Like the conversations, oh, this is a CHRO, right? Or this is a DE&I like persona here. They're going to have like different needs there. And so like being able to speak to that, like provide the BDR with the context on that, and then making sure that they actually can do that little decision tree from a sales enablement standpoint is obviously like really important, versus just like, hey, I'm going to have the same damn disco questions for each thing. Before we move on, the one thing I would also note there on kind of cold calling or warm calling, or let's just call it calling, right? Like, is I think you really have to be mindful of like the personas that you're talking to. So like a really great example of this would be, who were the personas that you guys sold to at Splash? Was it like marketing operations people, or was it like field marketing, like leaders, or was it like both?
It was to open the door, it was field marketers. To close the deal, we had to have a solid marketing operations sales play
Person.
Because it was obvious the pain that field marketers had is just how do you scale creating and attracting people, and then the marketing ops person sitting there is saying, I need it to sync data from whatever system you are collecting it in to my marketing automation tool, or it's off the table. And so
off the table. They're like, they're the permit, like, they weren't the one felt the pain, but they're the person. So like a good example there would be, my presumption would be that the field marketing people, they probably love to talk on the phone, right? Like, because there's talkers, and then there's like readers, writers. Interestingly enough, I'm more of a reader writer. I like asynchronous communication. I kind of get like a little like live communication kind of like is a little jarring to me. And so like I as a prospect, I kind of have like more of an engineering kind of like product managery communication protocol, whereas like selling to recruiters, selling to sales leaders, not sales ops, selling to sales leaders, sales managers, like HR people, they like to talk, right? Like it gives them energy. And then moreover, if you're talking to people who are like in the field, like field marketers, oh my God, like they're just like walking around all day long. They're not in front of like 3 monitors doing email all day long, like me. And so in situations like that, like if you're not calling those people, like you're missing out, right? Versus if you're doing like DevOps stuff, like say you're selling like observability or like security or something like that, and you're like trying to cold call into an IT person, or like, probably even like cold calling into like a sales operations person or whatever, who's like trying to do deep work. I feel that like that, like if you're not doing that, if you're not calling their appropriate person, or like if your engagement protocol or methodology is not aligned with like how the person likes to be communicated with, you're probably hurting yourself, right? And so that probably this is probably why you guys are ramping up your BDR team, because it turns out recruiters and HR people are like, all right, let's like talk to people, right? And like maybe they're not like super email centric. Is that kind of the rationale there?
Absolutely. And what we have really been focused on is cold calling really is not dead, but when you put marketing and BDRs, prospecting and marketing, to those same companies, you see magic happen. So one of the things that we do is it's not just phone calls, it's not just emails. We're buying ads and we are prospecting into these named accounts, and we are working together to get the personas that we have really good success in helping solve their needs by spending marketing dollars towards those same people that we are calling and emailing. It's one would say it's ABM, but we call it account-based strategy, because it's not just marketing, it's the same focus, and it's paying dividends. And to take it to like something that we've really done that I'm super impressed with the team, because not my idea. So thank you to the Brazen Ops team. We have taken, when leads are coming in and they're being warmed up by marketing, when they MQL, we are attaching the cadence that we are assigning based on the last campaign that they touched to make it specific to that persona and that person's interaction. So we are, when it passes over, attaching on that record in Salesforce what cadence they should be then added into. And that's just a step to then automate it. So it's just one seamless experience, and then it becomes a very personalized experience for that prospect.
So how does that work tactically? So like you, like the lead is over in Marketo. Are you guys in Marketo or HubSpot, or what do you guys use?
HubSpot.
HubSpot, nice. Us too. We use it for MSP and we use it for HRM. It's very user friendly. I haven't run into like power constraints, but I'm not much of a my marketing ops. I'm like a I don't know brown belt. What's the one right after white belt? Not I'm not amazing. So like you got a lead over here in HubSpot. They hit some sort of threshold, and the last thing they downloaded to like hit that threshold was like a DE&I guide or something like that. That then converts over. It goes MQL. And like it hits some sort of threshold, and that lead is marked as such over in Salesforce, and then it's like stamping some sort of like recommended cadence field over there, which is just like a string, and then that's on the lead, and then the BDR, and then that gets assigned to the BDR via like lean data or something like that, and then they pick it up and they're like, oh, okay, cool. I'm going to take I'm going to start engaging this person. I'm going to email them personally and like maybe LinkedIn connect with them. I'm going to and I'm going to like call them or whatever, but I'm going to use this DE&I angle. Is that kind of right?
Exactly. And so specifically when that HubSpot lead comes in, it's associated with a campaign. And on the campaign, when we create one, a program, anything. So if it's a webinar, if it's a content, a case study, we're attaching a cadence specific to that campaign. So that becomes where that
campaign can't go live unless it has a cadence.
Boom. Exactly.
Right? Because if it comes over here and the BDR is like, why did we do all this marketing? Wow. Yep. Okay. So the cadence is created over here. Do you guys use Outreach or SalesLoft?
Outreach.
Or something else?
Yep.
So literally when the campaign is created, a cadence has to be created over here with a unique URL and then keep going.
Yeah. And so when that cadence exists in Outreach and we're ready to launch the program, we put that cadence on the campaign object that then is referenced when a lead is added to that campaign. It also attaches to the contact record, and we use flows to push over, and it always is what was the last touch, and so it's always going to be the most relevant for that last experience for that prospect.
That's awesome, because it's like the most recent thing. Because I think this is something that people like BDRs and AEs like oftentimes forget about, is that like your client is doing like a bajillion things during the day and like a bajillion things like across the week. So showing up and be like, hey, I saw that you downloaded that like recruiting budget justification white paper a month ago, and they're like, what are you talking about? Versus like, oh yeah, like I remember I downloaded the DE&I thing yesterday. Okay, awesome. So essentially so just to be very tactical about it, it's like, hey, look, we're going to ship this new campaign. There's probably some sort of Asana checklist or whatever. Maybe you guys have like a Trello checklist or whatever. And literally one of the line items is like, did you create the cadence? And then it's over there. And so then that way the BDR and probably the names like align or something like that. And the BDR is like, oh, okay, cool. There it is right there. And like, obviously like they're doing their BDR work. Like this couldn't be 100% automated, because at that point, like they're looking at the person's LinkedIn profile and like getting good information. And like they're doing their like micro selling behavior. Right. And like adding their human value, but like a lot of the work has already been done. That's so Will. That is a power hour gem right there. That is super rad. That's that is so rad. Thank you for sharing that. Actually, kind of on this topic, and actually, AK had a really cool question here about budgetary, budgetary like advocating for budget and what have you. So I want to talk about that as related to a bunch of these things we're talking about. What are you guys doing for that that account-based strategy, like orchestration, specifically around, because as soon as you start doing things like display ads, right, and stuff like that, like that's where things can get like sticky. So are you guys using anything like Terminus or metadata or like Engagio or anything, or demand base for kind of the like turning on the ads stuff to like, so you got that air cover going while the BDRs are doing this, or are you guys, how's that work?
Yeah, that is definitely getting into the outer limits of my exact
Okay.
understanding of how it works at Brazen. But
Okay.
what I do know is that we are constantly making sure we are prospecting into the right accounts. And so
Sure.
we are constantly monitoring what our key variables are that make
Yep.
an ideal customer. And we are
Sure.
constantly having conversations on a weekly cadence in our tofu meeting, top of funnel meeting. And we are talking all the time about what's working, what's not working. And we're making those micro adjustments every week
Yeah.
so that it doesn't become this monumental effort of, hey, we
Yeah.
need to rethink our lead scoring. We need to rethink our ICP. We need to rethink. No, just take a very iterative approach. Just tackle it
Oh
one
man.
week at a time. And it makes things, I think, a lot easier.
Oh, Will, you're singing my tune, man. You're singing my tune. We got to redo this.
Oh.
We got to stop the assembly line. No, that sounds terrible. let's actually just hey, every 10th thing comes out with like a little bit of burrs on it. Oh, well, let's like rethink everything that we do on this assembly. Yeah, actually, how about if we just like walk the line and then figure out where the burrs are showing up, and then like maybe do a little bit of. Anyway, I love it. Will and I are huge process geeks. Obviously, what I think we bonded very early on around our mutual love of the book, The Goal, which is one of the things that I actually have all of my managers read, because it's all about like, it's lean manufacturing. It's like, set in the 1980s. It's all about like, it's like Toyota lean manufacturing brought to the United States. It's told as a narrative, which is really kind of fun. It's a novel, whatever, but it's like so applicable to any sort of process based thing. And like revenue is it's just an assembly line, right? Like what Will was just talking about, like just flows downhill. But yeah, anytime when people say like, well, we should rethink the entire, like the hair should stick up on the back of your neck. You should be like, oh, let's break everything. Sounds terrible. Anyway, okay. So let's talk about a little bit, because I think I want to talk about this, and then I want to talk about this, and then I want to talk about frameworks after that. So like, how do you approach like advocating for budget?
Yeah, I think that when I think about advocating for budget, I think about the sales process, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you have a challenge that is very well known across the organization, and you have key stakeholders that you know have that challenge as a challenge that prevents them from hitting or achieving their goals, you're really not talking about budget. You're talking about solving their problem, and budget is
Right.
just the tool that helps them solve that problem. And so I get this question from mentees all the time. They're like, well, how do I justify the cost of buying this? And I was like, well, what is the pain that you're solving?
Yeah.
Let's
Exactly.
do a little discovery here, right? Like I sit in sales training all the time, and I apply those same very skills to internal process management. And so when I think about, I saw Vidyard in the chat session, like we budgeted for Vidyard this year on a very simple premise that it is very hard to open doors, and we need to increase our conversion rates in order to make our unit economics more beneficial and attractive to our investors. We're a VC-backed company, and so all of those pain points line up with my key stakeholders' challenges. We're going to increase our win rates. We're going to spend a little money to do it. But if we do increase those win rates by increasing the MQL to SQL conversion rates, we're going to be more likely to hit our plan. Any questions? And I think I
just disperse the funds. No, this is a no-brainer. Let's go.
I make it sound simpler than that, but I think,
but it's the framework, right?
Absolutely. It's take the sales framework, do discovery, properly qualify, and really understand the pain, and then just dig into it. Like, and if it's not the right pain, that's okay too. There are tools that
Yeah.
I've advocated for and not purchased. That's okay.
Yeah.
On to the next.
Because there's also there's priorities, right? I mean, like, this is the thing. This is why, like, for folks who have not read The Goal, it's like absolutely fantastic. I'm gonna go ahead and drop it in the chat here, but the reason why I bring that up is because, like, it's working on whatever the constraint is right now, right? We have lots of problems. I have lots of problems. My staff will tell you he's got lots of problems. Some of them are organizational problems that can be solved with technology. Many of them are not. But and then there's the rank within there, right? And so, like, they're like, yeah, we may have a XYZ problem down here on, I don't know, what would be an example of this? Like, yeah, sure. Like, do we have maybe a customer engagement problem or whatever? Yeah, we do. But, like, our NRR is, like, I mean, it could be better, but our NRR is 150%. And so that's really great. So, like, that's not the burning problem. That's a little fire. It's a little fire over here. That fire over there of the fact that we can't get in touch with our HR people that we're targeting, right? Because we don't, like, they're no longer at their desk lines anymore. We know that they really like to talk they like to talk on the phone, but we don't have desk numbers, or sorry, all we have are desk numbers. Oh, damn, I got to solve this connect rate problem or else we are hosed. And so then, like, we work on that. And I think one before we move on to kind of, like, because, Will, I know that you're a big frameworks guy, and I want to talk about that. But, like, one of the metaphors that I like to have people think about in sales operations and just, like, process design, like we're talking about, is the product manager metaphor, right? Like, you're the product manager of this machine, and the machine is, like, it's the revenue factory, right? And you can use an assembly line as the metaphor, you can use the product as a metaphor, or what have you. But, like, guess what? We've all work on products, and like, oh man, like, wouldn't it be neat if it had this feature over here? Or, like, man, this bug is kind of annoying, but it's only kind of annoying, versus, like, oh my god, it doesn't load. Right? And so this is something that we do in my co-founder leads our product efforts, and so the standard framework for doing this in product management is value, right, as measured by some sort of metric. Like, is it win rate? Like, if you're a B2B organization, like, we think about features in terms of, does it help win rate? Does it help average selling price? Does it help net revenue retention? Does it help deal cycle? And then there's level of effort, like how calorically intensive it is, because we have engineers, and engineers are not cheap, and so they can only ship so much code. And so if you're constantly looking at, like, the upside value, right? Like, oh, this is going to make our win rate go up because we're going to have fewer closed loss reasons of, I don't know, Okta integration, right? Oh, they couldn't buy because we didn't have Okta integration. Oh, okay, across the trailing 6 months, how many of those was that? How big was the opportunity? Like, sum up all the ops associated. This might be why it's good to have good closed loss reasons, as an example. And so then you can do that. And then the same thing applies in your revenue process, because, like, as a RevOps person or a sales operations person, even a sales leader, like, you're just going to be getting, like, eaten alive by little, like, squeaky wheel reps, squeaky wheel managers constantly. And so just being able to, like, frame it to folks is like, cool, how frequently does that problem show up? How big of a problem is it? And, like, so, Will, you were saying this earlier, like, getting that discovery. And again, it's another Toyota lean manufacturing thing around the 5 whys. Like, why did that lose? Oh, because of XYZ. Okay, why about that, right? And to get to the actual root cause. That's kind of like one metaphor I like there. Will, I know that you're a big kind of frameworks guy. Maybe I was thinking that maybe you could share some of those with us before we pop back to one of the kind of live questions here.
Totally. And what I heard right there, Pete, is a framework, right? How do you make decisions?
Right.
It's the simple cost benefit analysis, and it forces the conversation to get a little quantitative. And
Yeah.
it creates alignment by aligning on what's important. And through that process, you learn so much more about the problem that you're solving that in itself is value. So I think that by simply applying a framework to making decisions, you understand problems better and can make better decisions as a result. And I think I feel like my brain just only thinks in frameworks these days. Like I need to like shake it when I'm done with work, because I hope that, like, you know, I don't do this too much to my wife, because she'll just like gloss over. I just don't understand you right now. And I'm like, oh, I'm in framework mind. Sorry. But one of the reasons that I like it was like a light bulb for me why frameworks are so powerful. It really comes to the Dunbar Theory. I've heard it a couple times this week alone, and the Dunbar Theory, for those that are not familiar, is the theory that created by Dunbar. Forget his first name. I'll send
Robin.
Robin Dunbar. His theory is that humans can organize groups to the size of 150 people. From there, you need new tools in order to communicate.
And then our sad little brains break above 150.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's like, and I was so naive, Pete. When Splash was a team of 30 when I joined, I was like, oh, cool. Like we could solve problems by yelling and throwing paper through the wall. And we were just like,
let me just turn around and ask him. Yeah.
I was like, oh, customer, you're having a problem. Let me talk to the decision maker right now. And that worked because the company was small.
Yep.
You get to that 150 mark, and so many investors at the time were like, this is gonna be a big one. And I was like, naive Will. I was like, I'm gonna prove you wrong. Nope. Like hard lessons learned, you evolve how you do work. When you get to a team size bigger than 150, the solution for me, enter frameworks. Frameworks are a tool to align communication across key departments and individuals. Some of my frameworks that I just absolutely really, really have attached to is just a sales process framework. Having a conversation about what is your sales process, what the key attributes are. The result should be really clear steps, really clear entry and exit criteria. And now you have a universal language of understanding where every deal is in the pipeline. No longer are the days where you can just go, hey, so how's that deal going? And you get the answer and you can send the numbers to the board and off you go. You need to have a framework in place to allow that to happen. Some other frameworks that I think are super, super powerful is MEDPIC. Many different versions.
The shared language is making my like hair stick up on the back of my neck on MEDPIC. Keep going.
If you are having the trouble in any kind of conversation around, my forecast is just not accurate, deals are slipping, it's hard to get everyone to update, Salesforce, or this person feels really good and they donut the quarter. You're like, what just happened?
Clearly felt good about something, maybe not their deals though. Like what?
I'm glad they were feeling good. That's for sure. But the reality is, enter framework like MEDPIC or MEDPIC, whichever you choose for your team. It creates that universal language that allows you to scale greater than 150 people and still be able to speak the same language without having to know that person specifically, but you have a shared understanding of what a qualified opportunity is. That is just like, man, that's why I love frameworks. It allows us to communicate greater and collectively grow the impact of any organization by aligning resources towards the same goals.
Yeah, I love that. Probably one of my so Medic came out of really famous. So one of the things that's kind of really awesome about Atrium, because like we work with at this point, I think it's like 250 sales organizations, and like obviously, in order to do that, I think we probably have talked to like more than a couple thousand, right? Like I wish our win rate was 30%, but it's good luck. You start like identifying these like sales diasporas, and like one sales diaspora, a really famous sales diaspora, is the PTC, Parametric Technology Corporation, diaspora. And so that PTC is actually where, and like this is a long time ago. This is back in the dark ages before they had computers. Well, actually, the funny thing is PTC sold CAD software even before AutoCAD. I forget what it was called, but computer-aided drafting software. It got deployed on like mini computers. I think my dad used it back at his aerospace company. But the problem is that like you didn't have a cloud CRM like Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever, where you have these like reps who are like on the ground, like communicating back to home base by like updating fields and what have you. And so what, like back in the day, it was just like flying blind as a leader. You're like, I don't know what the deal is here. And so what these guys did is they realized that they could decompose like the situation of like an opportunity into a more granular state than just like a stage, right? And the medic and medpic and what have you, they're just acronyms that then kind of tie to that. It's like M, I think, is like the metric that is looking to be improved. E is the economic buyer. The first D is like decision process. The second, decision criteria. The second D is decision process. The I is, I forget. I think it's actually something. Identify pain. It's like it's pain, but it's I. Yeah. I mean, when you're making acronyms, you got to make them memorable, even if like, you got to make them pronounceable, even if they don't like 100% line up. And then I forget even like what C is. So a kind of a really good recent encapsulation of this, the gentleman who led sales at PTC is a guy named John McMahon. Very famous sales leader who led sales there, also at Blade Logic, and then he's on the board at Snowflake. You guys have probably heard of it before. It's kind of a big deal. He wrote a book recently called The Qualified Sales Leader. That's pretty fun. It's like a good introduction to Medic and MedPick and what have you. We actually give away lots of copies of it at Atrium because we're all about helping people advance their skills. But yeah, so that's fantastic. I'm glad that that's another framework. So I think there was a good question a little bit further up. Oh yeah, it was from Carrie. I have a RevOps question for you. How does your tech stack look with all these platforms? Do you have them all integrated into Salesforce, and then Salesforce plug into Gmail? So Outreach, HubSpot, etc., all live within Salesforce, and Salesforce uses the source of truth for BDR and AE team. How do we approach that? Will, you want to take a shot at that to start?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the quick answer is that they all have to connect. They all have to speak to one another, or we're creating more problems than we're solving. So my tech stack as it stands today at Brazen does include Outreach, HubSpot, Salesforce. Gmail is connected via Outreach. And then we have a whole bunch of other things like Sales Navigator, Zoom Info, Atrium to give us data and analytics. We have Gong for call recording. And all of what I just mentioned speak to one another in fairly decent ways. There is always an asterisk, and we're always making improvements on how they speak well together. But they have to speak to one another, or you are creating more problems than you are solving. The single source of truth is Salesforce. It's the database. It's the system of record. Unless you have a very good data warehouse that allows you to take all that data in a very controlled and clearly defined way, Salesforce is pretty much where you're going to hang out from a company,
Yeah.
1 to 2
It's like
people to
yeah, it's like a
100.
baby. It's like a baby data warehouse, right? And
Yeah.
then you can start getting into like Redshift and Snowflake to the side of it as well, and start getting kind of weirder. So Carrie asked a follow-up question: why is Outreach connected to Gmail versus Salesforce? I'll tell you the way that we do it over here is, your sales engagement solution, whether it's Outreach or SalesLoft or Groove or whatever, what that's going to be doing is it's going to be sending email via Gmail or Office 365 or what have you, right? And then what it's doing though is it's logging those activities over here to Salesforce, right, as activity objects. And if you call, that call is not going to be being sent via Gmail. That call will be, I think actually most of the sales engagement providers use Twilio as their kind of like calling rails. Like that call is going to be happening via like whoever their internal provider is, and then that's going to be logging back to Salesforce, so you can count how many emails got sent, how many calls happened, what's the connect rate on our calls, et cetera, et cetera. So like the actions are going out via the email system, but they're being logged back into Salesforce. And the reason why that's important is so we can like calculate lots of things to tell us whether or not things are working, right? Like the most basic version of that would be, are the BDRs sending emails? We need to count that. The way that we count that is by putting that into Salesforce, so Atrium can read it and report off on like whether or not goals are being hit or what have you, or we have our reports over there. But even more sophisticated things would be like, oh, what is our opportunity creation volume split on a per cadence basis? Like which cadences are outperforming? Well, we got to pipe that information over into our baby data warehouse, Salesforce, in order to then calculate that, like ask that question. So that's kind of the way to approach that. So I hope that answers your question there, Carrie. So I think there was another question on another question on kind of like forecasting stuff that I wanted to talk about here. What's the so is forecasting just about like taking the information that's there and like adding it up and then being like, all right, here's the answer, or is it more about like a process? Like how do you think about that, Will, and what are the ways of like to tactically make forecasting better for folks?
It boils down to being forecasting is a process. It is an evolution. Yep. It is constantly changing, and it is elusive to say the least. But from
we call it we call it the F word at Atrium.
Oh, fun! Yeah, me too.
Yeah. We call it the F word because like everybody, like if you ask like 10 sales leaders, be like, hey, cool, can you describe forecasting to me? They'd all say like 10 different things. And it's like, oh yeah, it's pipe inspection. And then someone else would be like, oh, it's the thing that gets reported to the board. And another thing would be like, oh, it's what the reps commit. Right. And it's just, and of course the answer to that is like, no, it's all of that.
It is all of that. And what I think is intimidating is the fact that forecasting is predicting the future. And what crazier skill does that encapsulate than forecasting? Like, and it's so scary. Like there are so many unknowns, but it is all about forecasting. You hear Isla. Yes, Isla did join.
She want to say hi?
Do you want to say hi? I don't know where your mask is, but here, say hi, everybody. Can you say hi?
What? Hey, sweetie.
Hi. We're talking about forecasting.
Isla. Oh, it's like a puzzle, just like the puzzle you're working on.
It's just like a puzzle. All right. I don't know where it is. I'm sorry. Oh, check my jacket. My rain jacket.
So, darling.
Thank you
for
that. Yeah, forecasting.
Of course.
Second favorite.
So it's predicting the future, which is uncomfortable. You were saying.
Oh, absolutely. It's uncomfortable because you don't want to be wrong. But I think when I think about forecasting, not forecasting is the wrong. Putting yourself out there and trying to figure it out is the right. And so how do you make it more accurate over time? And I think it really is focused on the people, the process, and then the technology. And I think that it is so commonly like, how do you fix forecasting? What tools are out there? And I'm like, ooh, all right, that's a lot of work I'm hearing, because no tool is going to fix people or the process. Like, doesn't work.
What tool can I buy? Well, can you maybe tell me a little bit about how you guys are doing like pipeline inspection right now? What's that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Could you tell me about like, you know, how many stages do you have? 3? Oh, okay, cool, right? And so I think that like so I totally get that. And I was actually having a conversation with one of our customers the other day who, because like you can use Atrium for forecasting, because Atrium will report to you things like forward 90-day or like this quarter pipeline coverage or whatever. It's like, but it's just one use case. And then what he and I were talking about was how like it's a behavioral thing where you're constantly like, it's kind of like bonsai, like a bonsai garden or like a Zen garden, where you're constantly like cleaning your garden in order to, it's a mechanism by which the rep is like, cool, what's the situation with this deal? What is the next action that has to happen with it as a result? Like it, and then based on that reality in the world, is it modeled appropriately? Is the close date credible? Well, hey, I think what I'm understanding here is that you are not engaged with the economic decision maker, the economic buyer yet, and you have this forecast as a close date 25 days out. That feels to me that it's highly unlikely that that's going to happen. I get that the fact that you have not engaged with the economic decision maker yet, that is just a true fact in the world. So one, you have a next action, which is to get in front of that economic decision maker. Secondarily, we need to model reality better in our database by pushing that close date out. And so like that's, and then that's just one op. And then you go like think all through. And so like that's like a behavioral process there, which then makes the model more accurate. It's not going to be accurate. And then that rolls up to the manager, and then the RVP, right? But then if you're like doing faster roll-ups of total bullshit down
it's
here,
bullshit.
Yeah, you're just, well, we're hey man, we can roll up the forecast in 45 minutes. Oh, can you? Okay, wonderful. Like, how's that? Like, it's like a garbage in, garbage out situation. And so, yeah, it's like, I think this is another reason why we just like, we send out so many copies of that qualified sales leader, because like, if you're not doing the like pipeline inspection, this is the thing that like most managers, this is the thing that Atrium tries to help with, is like managers don't manage by like data driven, like by metric, because like they're far from that. It's a layer of abstraction, but at least they're coming from being AE. So they're good. They're pretty good at like understanding what's going on with deals, like intuitively. But the thing is that like that then has to be modeled appropriately. So then we can make judgments. And usually that's where there's like super slippage, is like the appropriate modeling.
Yeah, and I love the chat in the panel right now. It's calling out that we are trying to predict the future. And when I think about the people, process, technology, you need to have people bought in. If you don't have people bought in that this is important, you have no pyramid to stand on, no foundation. Yep. You then have that process clearly defined: stage, exit criteria, stage, exit criteria, stage, exit criteria. Those exit criteria become your inspection points. Hey, this is deal 3. You have it closing tomorrow. Most of the time it takes 60 days. This has been open for 3 days. Tell me why you think it becomes a closed deal in a day. That's the process, right?
Yep.
You're creating inspection points. Then bringing in from our previous conversation about frameworks, you add in another framework for quality, right? You could have a deal that is only at stage 3 and closed one and forecasted to close 1 in 2 days with a sales cycle that's 60, because you have all of the key qualification metrics in place. You know the economic buyer, you know the decision maker, you know their metrics, you know all of the key pieces that make that a qualified opportunity. And that then becomes a qualified opportunity that should be in your forecast. But if you don't have that foundation built, that discipline to really have that level of conversation universally across multiple reps, managers, RVPs, you're rolling up shit.
Yeah, and then then the other really cool thing about this too is what happens is there's a recursion loop that happens there. Because then what you're doing when you're doing that inspection, it's like, oh yeah, the reason why I'm forecasting this closing at the end of the month, even though I get you that normally like our deal cycle is 90 days and this is only 60, but what I did was as soon as I had the first disco call, I immediately multi-threaded into the economic buyer, and I pulled, instead of making that conversation happening in serial, I immediately parallelized that, right? And so and I pulled that for, wow, Will, that's a really creative idea. I wonder if we should systematize that across the team. Huh. I wonder, have you been doing this a lot? Yeah, I have. Actually, here, whoa, your deal cycle is like a third lower than everybody else's. That's crazy. Yeah, well, how did you think about, well, I read this book on it, no. You know, this is really fantastic, Will. I think what we should do is we should talk about this in team meeting, and maybe what we'll do is we'll update our sales playbook and we'll get everybody to do that too. Does that, and that way in our pipeline reviews on our individual, we're gonna be talking, hey, did you multi-thread that ED yet? Oh, no, I did. Hey, remember how we talked about that in the sales team agenda, 3 weeks ago? Let's go back to the agenda doc. Oh yeah, it's right there. Oh, thanks. Hey, thanks, manager. Right. And so that right there is essentially data-driven management. We're like, and then you can go the other direction too. Like, hey, there's something going on with this rep. Why is her win rate that much higher than everybody else's? Oh, it's because her conversion rate from stage 3 is so much higher than everybody else's. Why is this? Hey, Susan, why is your conversion rate from stage 3 just like, why are you blowing the doors off everybody else? Well, the way I'm running my pilots, I had this idea. And so I'm running it like this. Actually, there's a rep I am a big fan of who worked at a conversation intelligence software company a while back. One of the things that she recognized was that ultimately, like, even though we talk about like Chorus and Gong and whatever as being like manager tools, for like, oh, you got to listen to calls and you're going to coach people. Managers don't listen to calls because it's a bunch of work. Oh yeah, I need more work. But you know who loves call recording software? Reps love call recording software because they're like, oh man, hey, when's the CFO back from paternity leave? Right? Yeah. Oh, what was the name of the economic buyer that I need to be engaged with? And so what she realized was that the traditional pilot process had been manager centric, and the managers would be like, oh yeah, I never listened to any calls. I didn't listen to any calls. And what she realized, which was super rad, was that she was like, you know what? If I get this embedded with 4 reps and I'm like, look, you're gonna forget something on a call. You're gonna come back here, you're gonna search the transcript, and you're gonna find it. And it's gonna save your ass. And the reps are like, right? And then she would come back 2 weeks later, and sure enough, that had happened like 3 or 4 times per rep. And she's like, so is that useful? And they're like, right? And so she was running her pilots different, and you could see it in her win rate. It was nuts. And so what they did, like, so the data, the echo of the behavior in the data, right? The data is the echo of the behavior, revealed something, and then on inspection, they were able to say, hey, let's systematize this across the team. And then everybody's win rates came into band. Isn't that crazy?
And you know what? I love that story, because what it highlights is that forecasting is finding the positive. And I feel like forecasting has such a negative focus to it. It's like, ooh, it's scary. Yeah. Like, oh, I got to go in front of.
Oh, that's not real, Will. Here.
Here. What I would love is like this this world where forecasting is a safe space. Like, make your mistakes, but what I'm looking for is those things that are needle movers in the positive. We all can improve. It's okay. We all make mistakes. That's okay. The reason we do forecasting is to find the positive things that move the needle, and let's share it amongst the team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did this with Atrium. One of the things that we identified, it was in a QBR. It was actually 2 QBRs ago. So one of the things that's really neat about Atrium is it takes like 90 seconds to set up. You just connect to the CRM, and like poof, you've got this amazing data-driven sales management harness. And so like it's kind of obvious in retrospect. So guys, don't judge me that it took me so long to figure this out. But we had was one rep who just was like super proactive about getting people to light up their data, right? Like, because what we do is we have a discovery call with somebody. Usually what we do is we recommend like, hey, like those sound like really important use cases. You have a bunch of reps that are ramping right now. You want to pay attention to that. Let's like to go ahead and turn on your data. Well, some of our reps weren't being as proactive. And so this guy was just being so much more proactive. He was just giving himself so many more at bats. And you could see it in Atrium, where when I went back across his quarter, even though his win rate from a lit up data, like, so usually our win rates are about 50% from lit up data. His was like a little bit lower, it's like 40%, but he lit up twice as much data.
Wow.
Right? Yeah, it's crazy because he was just being super proactive. And so like we looked at that, I was doing like the QBR breakdown in Atrium with him, and we are just like, oh my God, like even though his like batting average went down a little bit more, post that, his at-bat count was just so much higher, and you could see it in his bookings. It was crazy. And so what we did was we then pivoted the organization or the sales team. It was like a pivot. It was just like a refocus. We're like, look, guys, you have to recommend like, hey, you know what? Let's just turn this on. It takes 90 seconds, right? Like it's read only. Why don't you just go share your screen and do it? And then like, and then lo and behold, all of our metrics went up. You could see, because we measure how many ops get to that stage. Everybody's metrics kind of rose after we also put a spiff on it. Shocking. We did training on it. We're like, hey, you get $100 if you light up data, because we know it's a really good leading indicator to business. Also, you should anyway, because you're going to close more business, but we'll also do the spiff too, just to like really focus minds. And so like that loop of like discovering something great and then systematizing it across the team, like continuous improvement, right? Right? It's just continuous improvement, right?
Just Lean just like Six Sigma. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Cool, man. Well, we're out of time here. So next week, we're going to have another really awesome sales leader, Tammy Sexton. She runs enterprise sales at Launch Darkly. She's super rad. Actually, she's former PTC also. There's part of that diaspora. So Will, this was super fantastic. I really appreciate you taking the time. It was so nice to see Isla on the call as well. I would love her feedback on our forecasting discussion. Make sure that she signs off on that. Okay. But otherwise, I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Thank you so much for taking the time. And for everybody else, thanks for joining Power Hour. Hope you got your sales nerd fix for the week, and we'll see you guys back here next Friday with Tammy Sexton. Okay.
Thanks everybody.
Will. Take care.